James Harden is the clear NBA MVP this season, and he just might be the greatest offensive player we've ever seen. Well, at least according to his head coach, Mike D'Antoni. What is going on, y'all? 5 Sports Talk, back at it with another video talking, of course, some NBA here to talk about one James Harden, who his coach now comes out and basically says that he thinks he is the greatest offensive player he's ever seen. Now, of course, this is what you would expect from a coach to say, your coach to obviously support you. But you know what? We are talking about James Harden. We are talking about the guy that I expect to win the MVP award this year. So it's not like he's saying this about Clint Capella or somebody like that. So let's dissect this. Let's look at this argument of whether or not it's true if James Harden is the greatest offensive player ever. And let's take a look at all aspects of it and break down if Mike D'Antoni is right or if he's wrong. So I will first start with what D'Antoni basically said, and you can go look it up on ESPN or any article that posts it. You can go ahead and Google it. But basically, his quote was, "That's the best offensive player I've ever seen. They were running guys to him. He just steps a little further back and makes a three. The way he can pass, see the floor, get fouls, layups, floaters, maybe a lob, maybe out to the corner. He has so many weapons. Now he's shooting those step back threes. It's impossible to guard him. It's impossible." End quote, obviously. So clearly, all of the statements that Mike D'Antoni made about James Harden, that is true. He has all of these weapons in his arsenal. And James Harden is, like I've been saying, the MVP, the clear-cut MVP this season. He is going to win that award for sure. So with that being said, is he the greatest offensive player I've ever seen? The clear and easy answer to say is no. And the reason is obviously you've got guys like Michael Jordan, of course. You've got guys like Kobe Bryant. You've even got guys in our generation now with LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry that you can make the argument for. So when you take a look at that, you can say, oh, James Harden isn't the greatest offensive player ever. But here's what I want you guys to do. Do not cloud your judgment in this argument in terms of team awards, team accolades, and anything else that doesn't have to do with the actual statement of offensive player, okay? So everybody knows James Harden doesn't have any championships. That does not define this argument. So let's not focus on that. But with that being said, we do have to look at what makes an offensive player, okay? We're not talking about defense because obviously if we were talking about the best overall player, there's a reason LeBron James is the best overall player, but James Harden is not, okay? Offensively, does James Harden have a weakness? Like Mike D'Antoni said, he can make the three, make the two layups. He's the best in the NBA at drawing fouls. There's not a spot on the floor that I feel like James Harden can't hit a shot from. The only thing I will say, though, is probably a post game is what he is missing from his offense. But we are in the era in the NBA where the post game is basically irrelevant. It's either you shoot a three or you're inside taking a two in the restricted area. And especially in Mike D'Antoni's system, which was a great point brought up by Chris Broussard. He brought this up on Undisputed by basically saying James Harden's offensive numbers get elevated because he's in Mike D'Antoni's system. And that is 1,000% true. Steve Nash won 2 MVPs in his system. You've had numerous guys, Jeremy Lin, Linsanity, happen during Mike D'Antoni's system. You've had numerous guys that have had elevations in their numbers under Mike D'Antoni, so that definitely plays a part into it. But James Harden, for better or worse, does not have a post game. So when I take everything into account, is there something James Harden can do that other guys can't? So let's take a look at Kevin Durant, for example. Let's take a look at a guy like Steph Curry. I don't think there's anything that James Harden can do that Steph Curry can't, that Kevin Durant can't. Okay? Now, you might say James Harden's a little better at drawing fouls, drawing contact than those guys. Sure. But if we're kind of splitting hairs here, is there anything that you flat out know that Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, maybe even LeBron James can't do? And to me, it's hard to bring up something like that. So for me, I would say James Harden is definitely one of the best offensive players. But when you say he is the best offensive player, I think I would have to lean more towards a Kevin Durant. maybe more even towards a Steph Curry, just because I feel like Kevin Durant, you can't even guard the guy just because of how tall he is. James Harden, we've seen him in the playoffs have bad games, and we have seen him, well, everybody has bad games. Even Kevin Durant has had a bad game here and there. But we have seen that James Harden in this system might be getting a little bit more elevated versus the other guys who I think, like Kevin Durant, like Steph Curry, who I think are just as skilled offensively, who I think can do just as much. It's just that James Harden has a little bit more volume to bank on. So with that being said, I think it's nip and tuck. I think you can take KD, you can take Steph, you can take Harden. You can make the argument for either of them. The only reason I'm not putting LeBron here is just I don't think LeBron is as skilled. He's still the best player in the world. Best player in the world, LeBron James. But he might not be as skilled as these other guys in just terms of offense, okay? And again, that's not a knock at LeBron. He is the best player in the world. But definitely do think that those three guys, Steph, Harden, and KD, you can make an argument either of these three guys could be the greatest offensive player you've ever seen. And I know people want to use Michael Jordan and these other guys like Larry Bird as examples, but the game has evolved, folks. Okay, Michael Jordan is just not that great of a three-point shooter, was not that great of a three-point shooter as these other guys. Yes, MJ had a post game, but the era was different back then. So it's hard for me to compare, folks. I'm not trying to bash MJ, but in that era, the three-point shot wasn't as important. The post game was, so MJ perfected the post game. Could he have perfected a three-point shot? I'm sure he could have, but we'll never know. So it's hard for me to compare. But if we just look at MJ himself, and if we look at the fact and compare that his offensive skill set versus these other guys, Steph Curry, James Harden, and Kevin Durant just have a better offensive skill set, I would say, than Michael Jordan. Again, that's not a knock. He's the greatest of all time because of team accomplishments, because of the fact that he has won 6 rings and he has been clutch when needed to be. But we are just putting everything in a vacuum, and that is what I need you guys to focus on. In a vacuum, who is the best offensive player ever? You can make the argument any of these three guys are. I don't think James Harden is a clear cut above them. I think this is just his coach obviously saying that, but of course it is James Harden. He is one of the best players in the NBA today. So that's what I think, folks. Let me know what you guys think in terms of who you think is the greatest offensive player ever. I think we are living in the era right now where we should be blessed because we are witnessing some of the greatest offensive talent we have ever seen in these guys, and James Harden just happens to be one of them. So let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. Make sure you guys follow me on my social media links down below for that. If you agree or disagree, again, let me know in the comments down below. Turn on post notifications. As always, thanks for watching.